But here I was in my middle years, and of course my hair was showing the ravages of time and its colour, and that, although I knew that my hair had gone grey, it came as quite a shock to me to see this grey-haired lady standing in front of the mirror there, and I kept actually going away, and then I'd go back and have another little peep just to make sure it was quite true, and it was.
Did you like your face, or you didn't like it very much?
Not at the beginning. I think I got fonder of it because there wasn't much that I could do about it. I thought, well, I've got to live with this for the rest of my life, so I think I began to look for the good points.
I just wonder, you don't talk about much, although you do say you love makeup and you love clothing and so on, but did your clothing get more colorful after you could see, or did you stay with the English woman's outfit?
Do you know, I think, if anything, I became a little more subdued in the patterns on the clothes that I wore. For instance, I had a dress in my wardrobe that I brought to go to a wedding, and it was a very bold, striped dress, and I remember the first time I took that out of the wardrobe after I was able to see it, I thought, my goodness, have I been walking around looking like a deck chair at Blackpool?
I can't wait. I'm dying to hear about the story about Blackpool, but I think we'll wait a minute for that. I want to talk about what was wrong with your eyes in the first place. What was the diagnosis originally?
Well, when I was a baby, I had measles, and measles affected my optic nerves and my retinas quite badly. And then as I got older, obviously my sight was deteriorating, and I had cataracts. And I suppose really, being a child, I was so busy being a child, I didn't think about the fact really that my sight was getting worse. And the point is that as my sight got worse, my other senses were taking over. So people often say to me, oh, was it terrible for you as a child, knowing that you were going to go blind? But I think I'm being absolutely honest when I say I didn't really think about it, because I was just too busy being a child and too busy growing up. And then, as I say, my sight did deteriorate fairly gradually, but I couldn't say at what time my sight actually really, really disappeared, because for the last few years before my operations I wasn't able to see anything at all except very, very bright lights, and they had to be really very bright indeed. But I couldn't say how long that was the case.
Now, the operation that restored part of your sight, was it a particularly unusual one at the time in England? Was it available before and you just didn't know about it?
Oh, it wasn't unusual at all. I suppose that because I had been blind for such a long time, I just didn't think about going to eye specialists. I mean, I think people don't. It was just the way that things were for me. And it was a very simple operation I had. It was just a cataract operation. But you see, I didn't think that there was any point in having cataracts removed, because I didn't think there was any health left in my optic nerves or in my retinas. And it was just a gamble. When the eye specialist, because of course I went to see him first, because somebody pointed out one day that I had a very bad squint. Mm-hmm. They didn't say it unkindly, but I suddenly thought, good grief, I don't want people to think that I've got a dreadful squint. That sounds horrible. So I went off to see an eye specialist to ask if I could have my eyes straightened, and he told me that was a relatively simple operation. And he said, but I think it would be worth removing these cataracts that you've got. And I said, well, do you think there's any point? Do you think that I would be able to see anything? And he said that he couldn't actually promise anything, but he thought it was worth having a go because there was nothing to be lost.
No.
That was it. 3.5 weeks later, I had the first cataract removed, and I think we were all amazed, actually, really amazed that I had what was estimated to be 25% of vision in that left eye.
It reminded me as I was reading those passages of the moment that they removed the bandages, and I don't know whether you've seen, there have often been films made of this moment of revelation when the bandages are removed, and then there is this great explosion of light, and it's, you must have seen these movies or certainly read stories like this. Certainly a similar sensation, I guess.
Well, that's the way it is in films. That isn't the way it was for me in life, because when the dressings were taken off my eyes, one of the nurses said, "What can you see?" And I just didn't know what I could see. I knew that I could see lots and lots of very bright lights. I could see a bright horizontal light in front of me. I could see 3 bright vertical lights to my right. And when I looked down, I could see 4 shafts of very, very bright light with deep, deep, dark valleys between them. And I couldn't make out what that was. And instinctively, with my right hand, I felt for what it was I could see so near me that was so bright, only to find that I was touching the fingers of my left hand. And because I hadn't seen anything for such a long time, things looked incredibly bright. The 3 vertical lights, for instance, were 3 bottles on a dark shelf, and the bright horizontal light was actually a frame, a white painted frame above the door in the little treatment room.
What do you think was the most unsettling thing in those first few days after the operation?
I think the most unsettling thing was learning what to do with this sight, and you see, I had no idea how much I could see, because, okay, it was estimated that I had perhaps about 25% of vision, but to someone who has been totally blind for a long, long time, you can't imagine needing to be able to see more than I could see. I could see faces, and I could see people walking about, and I could see pictures, and I could see very large print. And so to me that seemed like all the sight that anybody could ever need. But as the days went on, I realised that compared with perfect sight, I had very little indeed. So it's all relative, isn't it?
Well, yes, and then I guess you get impatient because you want more, too.
Oh gosh, yes, and glasses were prescribed for me to help me to read, and that's great, because I can read fairly small print with my glasses. But you see, I'm still much quicker at reading Braille, and still prefer to read Braille. But it's very handy to be able to read print with my glasses on, because I can take packets of food out of my cupboard, and I can read the instructions how to make things up. You know, a packet of soup now, I know whether I have to put half a pint of water or a pint of water to it.
Do you know, I was, I have to tell you, reduced to tears on many occasions whilst reading this book. And I think that one of the most touching moments that anyone could understand is the moment that you saw your husband and your children, your 2 sons. I mean, was Ian, your darling husband, he was had to live up to your expectations, because he's a handsome devil, isn't he?
Oh yes, I'm sure he is. Everyone else says he is anyway, and I think he is too. Yes, he came up to my expectations. In actual fact, I'd had quite a clear picture of him in my mind, and he wasn't unlike the picture that I had, although the pictures I had of people in my mind were never pictures in great detail. But he was really quite a lot like the way I'd imagined him. But it was different with the children, because this isn't an easy thing to say, because we all think our children are wonderful. But people had often said to me, you know, you've got 2 of the most handsome boys. And I used to think, oh, well, they're being kind. You know, I expect they're not bad-looking kids, but I expect they're being kind because they know that I can't see them. But my goodness, that first time I ever saw my boys, oh, I think their looks were far beyond anything that I'd envisaged in my imagination. I thought they were absolutely wonderful. And in actual fact, for quite some weeks afterwards, I couldn't have spoken to you like this about them. I thought they were wonderful, and it made me cry.
Yes, well, I can see it. It made me cry when I read about it, and just to touch their darling faces.
Yes. Oh, you see, they were aged then 10 and 15, and you know, it's a really wonderful thing. People had often said to me, oh, what a pity you can't see your children. And that used to make me cross, because I used to think, I know exactly what my kids are like. You know, I've brought them up from the minute they were born. I've touched them. I know every little bit of them. But, oh, gosh, you know, nothing could be like seeing their faces for the first time.
And then you were able to see your dogs, your 2 just terrific dogs. One was retired. Martin got retired, and you had a new guy, Victor. Yeah. But to see those 2...
Oh, that was wonderful, because, you know, they're beautiful, and I owe so much to them. But the first time, I think I'd been home for a few days, actually. And you see, I wasn't in the habit of looking at things. I didn't think to look down at the dogs, not actually physically look down at them. And then one day, they were just both standing at the door waiting to come in. And I looked down because I was up a step. And there were these 2 lovely faces, one very pale cream and one a golden face, and 2 big pairs of brown eyes just gazing up at me, and I knew then what people meant about the trust and loyalty in a dog's eyes. And you know, that Martin, he's 16, and really, he's a bit of a naughty old man because he rules he rules the roost these days, and he does something really quite naughty, like he comes and steals something out of the kitchen, or he comes scrounging, and I feel like being very, very cross with him, and he's got it all worked out because he looks at me with these two enormous round dark eyes and such an innocent face, and I just forgive him anything now that he wouldn't have got away with that before I could see his face.
Well, you know, the interesting thing is that you must have had some memory, although your eyes hadn't had to work for many years, like 40-ish. You must have had a memory of what a dog looked like, did you?
Well, yes, I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, but everything was just so much heightened when I saw it again.
But it's interesting when you talk about seeing a kitchen knife, but not recognizing it, and that to touch it, then you would make the connection.
That's right. One day I was in the kitchen and I saw this thing on the table, and I kept looking at it, and I kept thinking, I don't know what that is. It's long and it's slightly curved, and it looked dark to me because the light wasn't glinting on it. And then eventually I just had to touch it, and the minute I touched it, it was a stainless steel knife. But you see, the knives that my mother had when I was a child had white handles and just a steel blade, so I don't think I'd ever seen a completely stainless steel knife. But do you know, even after 2.5 years, even when I can see a thing quite clearly, I still want to touch it. I still get this sort of most detailed experience of a thing through touching it with my fingers.
Well, when you couldn't see, you would have a mental picture of what things would look like. You would conjure them up in your mind. And then I wonder if, for a while, or indeed even now, when you want to remember how you used to see things in your mind's eye, whether you just close your eyes and you can conjure up that image again?
I can't really remember. It's strange. It faded very, very quickly. I often think to myself, what was it like when I couldn't see at all? And I really, really can't remember. And the closest I get to it now is, for instance, talking to you, talking to folk on the phone, or listening to the radio,
yes,
and having a picture of somebody, and that's the nearest I can get to it now. But I just cannot recall now what it was like when I couldn't see anything at all.
I'm sure you must recall that first big visit to the supermarket. It must have been terrifying.
Gosh, it was terrifying. And I discussed it actually with a friend who'd been to Tanzania, and she said it was like this for her when she first came back to England, and actually saw shelves in shops with things on them. And I went into the supermarket, and there were these tremendously bright lights, and it just felt as if there were great monsters sort of breathing fire on me from the ceiling. And then I looked, and I saw all these racks of food towering up and up and up towards these bright lights, these monstrous lights, and there were patterns all over the tins and the cartons and the jars, and I was absolutely frightened to death as I walked down between the aisles of shelves. I felt almost as if little hands were going to grab out from the shelves and hurt me. It was a terrible feeling. I wanted to get away from it. And I remember that after that first visit to the supermarket, I didn't go back again for 3 or 4 weeks. I just couldn't face it. I couldn't face looking at all those great towering shelves of things.
It must have been exhausting for you.
I did get very tired, and I mean, really, I should have been absolutely head over heels, because there was so much that delighted me. You know that there was, because you've read my book, and there still is. But at that time, I went through a time of dreadful depression, because I'd got this sight, I could see things, but I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know how to use it. I could see my way along a corridor, but I didn't know how to use the information that was coming to me. You know, I've got a feeling that learning to see again, albeit it's not perfect sight, is probably almost as difficult as when things are happening the other way, when one's going blind. Now, you know, I'm sure that people who are losing their sight will say, oh, that can't be. You should be grateful. And I am very, very grateful. I think it's a wonderful, wonderful, miraculous thing that happened to me. But the first 18 months at times were very, very traumatic, because, well, just because there were so many new things hurling themselves at my brain, that my brain somehow just didn't know what to do with the information, the new information that was coming at me.
Well, did you feel, and I think that you did slightly, feel guilty that you had been given this second kick at the can?
Yeah, I did. And again, that's another difficult one, isn't it? But, it seemed to me that I'd had a good life. I'd had a good career as a teacher. I was married to a smashing husband. I got a nice home. I got 2 smashing kids. And, so why me? Why not some other unfortunate people who were finding things much more difficult than I was? I had no tremendous hang-ups about my blindness. It was a nuisance. It was a dreadful nuisance at times. It was frustrating at times because of its limitations. But I wasn't sad about it. I was never bitter or sad about it. And I think that the main difficulty came when I started getting letters from people, particularly overseas, who would write and say, please tell me about this specialist. Give me the name and address of this specialist who did this wonderful operation.
Oh, yes.
And I did actually answer every letter, and I said it was just a routine operation. But it did upset me because a lot of them told me all the details of what had been happening to their eyes, the history of their sight. And this sounds a dreadful thing to say, but I couldn't cope with it. I didn't want to know about it at that time. I felt deep sympathy for these people, but there was nothing that I could do, and it just made me feel absolutely guilt-ridden at that time. I don't feel like that now.
You've learned to live with this now.
Yes, I have, because yes, this was meant for me, and it's been meant for other people, and it's happened to other people too.
Did you find that people's attitudes towards you changed once they knew you could see them?
Well, at first it was very difficult for people because they didn't realise how much I could or could not see, because the man in the street doesn't know very much about sight. To the man in the street, I think that he imagines you've either got perfect sight or none at all, not that there are thousands and thousands of grades of sight in between. And it must seem very strange to people that they could see me in the hairdressers looking at magazines, and if I put my glasses on and held the book close, I could actually read the magazines, but I didn't have the sort of sight that made it possible for me to get around without the guide dog.
I'm sure you were grateful that you did have a fear that you might have to give him back.
Well, no, actually, the guide dogs, the Blind Association, sent one of their instructors to see me quite soon after I came out of hospital, and I was all on the defensive when I went to the door, and I said, I can't see enough to manage without Victor. I do need Victor. You haven't come to take him away. And do you know what that man said? He said, Mrs. Taylor, he said, I've come to see how much you can see, but I've also come to tell you that if you do have enough sight to be able to manage without Victor, we're not going to take him away. We're going to let you keep him as a pet. That was wonderful, wasn't it?
Oh, it was wonderful. And how old is Victor now?
Victor's 6, and I really don't think that he'd settle with anyone else, because he's the sort of dog that's very, very attached to one person, and I'm sure he loves me, and I just don't think he could have coped with a change, so they probably understood that.
Tell me about the process of writing this book. I mean, if you got a lot of attention after your operations and before this book, and people somehow found out about this operation and found out about you, and the press was all over you. Now you've written this book, and you're a bona fide celebrity now. What has it done? Changed your life so much?
It hasn't really changed my life tremendously. I mean, in one part of the book I describe when sometimes I'm tired, I look in the mirror and I have double vision, and there are 2 me's looking back at me.
Yes.
And that's really rather significant, because I feel like 2 people in a way. There's the me that sometimes goes off to London or flies up to Glasgow to do a TV spot, and there's the me that wrote the book and had that wonderful tour all over the country in September, and the me that's talking to you now. And then, before I came here tonight, what was I doing? I was making a casserole, I was peeling the potatoes, I was telling the kids to stop quarrelling, and my daily life goes on just the same, just a mum, and I do some supply teaching, and I went off to hear the carol service in our parish church this afternoon of one of my kids' schools, and got soaking wet, and sort of went home on the bus. So all the things that everybody else has been doing this afternoon, and then this evening here I come to a studio to talk to somebody in Vancouver. So it's a bit of the old life and it's a bit of the new life, and they're beautifully mixed together, actually. I think that's great.
Well, I cannot thank you enough for coming in, evening your time, afternoon mine, and talking about your wonderful book. I'm sure it will do very well.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for asking me.
I wonder if you might like to choose a piece of music that we would put here. You mentioned several in your book, but I think I know which one you might like me to play.
Yes, I'm sure you do, actually. Now, this was never actually a favourite piece of music of mine. It's not representative of my taste, but soon after I came out of hospital, in fact, the day after I came out of hospital, I was in the house on my own, and Ian was out in the car, and he rang me up and he said, I'm listening to Radio Derby. He said, and the girls down in the supermarket have requested a record for you. It's going to be on Let's Put Your Radio On. So I put my radio on, and the announcer was just announcing on Radio Derby that they were going to play for me Roberta Flack singing The First Time Ever I Saw Your Face. And, you know, I wasn't very far through listening to that record before I was aware of the tears running down my face. It was very, very poignant, because it hasn't been very long since I had first seen the faces of Ian and Adam and Ben and Martin and Victor, the dogs. And this is now a very, very special song for me. So I'd love you to play that, if you will, please.
I surely will. I thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Vicky.
I've been speaking with Judy Taylor. She is the author of As I See It. It is published by Grafton Books, and you can order it. And I guess eventually and ultimately it will be available in all bookstores in Canada.
It's Roberta Flack. The First Time Ever I Saw Your Face.
The first time ever I saw your face, I thought the sun rose in your eyes, and the moon and the stars were the gifts you gave to the dark and the endless skies, my love. The first time ever I kissed your mouth, I felt the earth move in my hand, like the trembling heart of a cat